Welcome everyone. Today we're going to discuss on business innovations and we have our world-class speakers, Professor David Smith, Mr. James Eid, Mr. Dan and Mr. Adam. So today is our special day. Professor Adam Smith, happy birthday to you. It's actually you are a great scholars, great innovators, and you contribute a lot for World Talent Economy Forums, and you also a board of advisor for us. And with your like guideline strategic analysis, already you win the heart of many Asia Pacific countries people. So thank you for all of your support for World Talent Economy Forum. I want to start from Professor David Smith. You are an expert on business innovation and strategy. How you want to analyze today's topic?
Well, business innovation is a very important topic, and it's one that so many different attempts have been made to work through it, to do the things to make it successful. And we see that going many places. Oftentimes, part of business innovation is how do I become a company like an Amazon, like a Tesla, like a Facebook today? If I go back 25 years ago, it's how do I become an IBM? How do I become a GE? So we've got different models that we've fallen over at different times, but they've each gotten to their point of innovation in very, very different ways to get there. Um, there is some very interesting models that you're seeing in place. The growth of community-driven business accelerators has been a model of really the last 15 years. And until COVID hit, that model was being replaced by the growth of common work areas, the WeWork type of corporations being put there to just bring people together and mesh them together to exchange ideas. Um, then you see national-based innovation factories, kind of like the Y Combiners, the Mass Challenge, and those coming together and help. And I think all of those have a place in business innovation. But for example, like Mass Challenge, I love their intense approach to get you to think about how to write a business plan, how to design a minimal viable product, how to look at marketing, and how to grow a team. Those are key necessary elements to make it happen. My challenge I have with business innovators, incubators like those, is they force you to do a minimal viable product, and they do not help you make a product that's sustainable and scalable in the marketplace. The key to success as a startup is to move fast to validate your concept, to get to a minimal viable or proof of concept is the word I prefer to use, a proof of concept product. But then how do I take and develop that into a product that can scale across the marketplace? How do I begin to make it a company that has one product? And I'm already starting to think about how I grow it, how I expand it, or maybe what's my second product. And that's what business incubators totally ignore. They get you past the very first launching point. So they get you on the end of the plank on the outside of the ship, and then they push you off. And that is one of the challenges you have with incubators. But to look at how to get a community to support the entrepreneurship, how to support the companies, and create a network of people to help them not just the first 6 months, but year after year until they're successful with mentorship, with relationships, with support, with government assistance where appropriate to fast track permits, to do other things like that. Those are the keys to successful business innovation.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor David Smith, for your excellent analysis.
And
Mr.
you
James
see,
Eid.
I don't have strong opinions here.
Okay, okay, thank you, uh, Mr. James. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharif. Yeah, that was an excellent setup, David. Thank you very much. Um, one of the things that I'd like to talk about when we talk about innovation is that, we always think of innovation as brand new ideas, and they don't always have to be. I want to double down on what David was talking about, how their approaches can be supportive or just, you know, attempting to solve a problem that isn't really the problem. And incubators can fall into that latter category, where they are trying to help people do certain things that are maybe necessary, but are certainly insufficient. And you have to look at the whole thing. You have to have a plan for the whole thing. How do you get started? How do you keep going? Because it's about being sustainable. And not only do you have to be solving a problem that is out there, that's real, that is the market is demanding. If you're solving a problem that the market demands, then your chances of success go up. If you're solving a problem that there's no market for, your chances are not good at all. So that's part of what you have to do. But how do you come up with a brand new idea? You don't have to have a brand new idea. Let's look at the video game market. Somebody does a video game and it's successful. Well, then there are all these copycats that do something very, very much the same, only different to an extent that is interesting. And so people can be profitable that way too. Doing something that is not, they didn't invent it, they didn't come up with the idea, but they came up with a new way of presenting the same old idea, and that's popular. So if it's popular, you're going to be successful. The other way that I look at these things is that the borrowing is not necessarily copying. Well, let's take the steam engine, for example. Fulton is famous for making the first steam engine ship, but he didn't invent the steam engine. The steam engine was in wide use. It was used mostly, I think, in mining, but it was used in a different application. And he thought, well, why not power ships that way? And oh my goodness, that was revolutionary. That was innovation. But he didn't invent the steam engine. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel to make money, to be successful. For example, the video games. And you don't have to come up with a brand new idea. You have to come up with an appropriate use of it that may be revolutionary. So these are all different ways of looking at how do you start your business and how do you become special? How do you innovate? And innovation can be a brand new idea, but that's not the only way. Sometimes it's doing an old idea better or using an old idea a new way. So that's what I wanted to say to kick us off. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dan. What does business innovations mean for you? And most important thing is that you are also one of the innovative personnel. So how the youth communities, they can grow their innovation, especially when we move forward with a education system. This education system actually not support too much of innovations. It's not allow too much of innovations. So sometimes innovative person, they become frustrated. And even I'm just talking about some of like developing nation, how it works. That's why I also leave my countries. I cannot. So what is your opinion? How we can make a better strategy for that?
Yeah, boy, great start to this topic. My dad was a master machinist at Hughes Helicopters, and he invented all kinds of things that sped up their production line. He had to give them all away because when you work for a big company and you innovate something, they own your innovation usually. But he was such a fan of scale models as a way of explaining things. And another one of my favorite teachers, Richard Bucky Fuller, he had an idea for something called the geoscope, which would be a spherical scale model Earth, but it would be covered with LEDs. I guess they didn't really have LEDs when he just described this, but little lights. So you could animate any kind of data display in real time or in time lapse on this Earth, and it would give you an amazing sense of perspective to see, there's my planet. Okay, here's what I'm trying to understand about it, and it's happening in color and in real time. And if I take a magnifying glass, I can see, my house actually on the 150 foot wide version of the geoscope, which I'm not sure if it was built at Epcot or Disney World, but your house would be like a 1 pixel resolvable little dot on a globe that size. So this goes back to something that some of the astronauts experienced when they left the planet, called the overview effect, and getting that sense of integrated perspective, your place in the universe is going to be so crucial in motivating people and educating people. I really want to support all the different ways we can change people's perspective to show them their place in the universe and on this fragile spaceship. And one thing I think we could develop are innovative, kind of like mini geoscopes. I'm visualizing something that would be the size of your watershed that would fit on a card tabletop, and you could do all the same kind of LED patterning and displaying of information. So I'm actually trying to develop that for the street fair coming up here in Thousand Oaks on October 17th, and I'll be working with the open source community and other folks to see if we can get something like that and get it scaled out to all the classrooms and libraries of the world, where they can kind of experience this distributed overview effect using some of the state-of-the-art teaching technology. Because really the geographic information system awareness is not even being properly used yet. And once that really gets rolled out, it's going to be like a steam engine for a new industrial revolution. So I'm really excited to be involved in all these things, and I'll pass the feather on there.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, you are from Europe, and actually country like Malaysia, they have a very great relationship with UK especially. Even their like government models and educational models, and many area actually Malaysia love to do work with UK. But my question is that even when personally I was in UK, I saw that UK like education system, especially I was in Oxford University and Cambridge University, they actually motivate the innovative things, the innovative solutions. So if you share some of the academic cultures with our communities, that how actually this kind of culture actually develop, and how business innovations helps to grow the business organization.
Thank you, Sharif. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because I live in Nottingham, as you know, and Nottingham is a university city, but we don't just have one university, we've actually got two. So we've got Nottingham Trent University and Nottingham University, just Nottingham University, and two universities in one city. And I think it's with I think Nottingham University has a campus over in Malaysia, actually. So there's that academic link there, and it's and they do. I think both institutions teach business, and when I was friends with a lot of students there, many of them were studying things like international business, business studies. So there's a very kind of there's a very cosmopolitan atmosphere in Nottingham. There's lots of people, lots of students coming from China on visa, and so there's a definite atmosphere of global unity there, which I think is to Nottingham's credit. And I think I think it's because London is one of the big financial centres of the world, that there's this kind of this motivation to be on the world stage, and it's, and like you said, with Cambridge and Oxford, we've got this university tradition going back hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's something we should be very proud of. And one thing I thought about this topic is, furthermore, is that I think at the rate things are going, we need to remember to tailor education to help people keep up with how quickly the world is changing. And one example to illustrate this point is cryptocurrency. I feel quite embarrassed to admit that my technical knowledge and know-how is prone to some blind spots. I veer more to like the creative side of things. So I must admit that I still, even now to this day, cannot wrap my head around cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and digital wallets, as well as other people my age and younger, and older as well. It's a bit awkward to admit such thing on internet broadcast. But as cryptocurrency know-how is becoming more of a requirement these days, so even though I'm a part of the younger generation, give or take, where other members can easily take to this like ducks in water, I struggle to understand it a little bit. So I tried reading tutorials and instructions about how to operate transactions in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and it was a bit like wading through treacle trying to, conceptualize it, visualize it. It felt quite counterintuitive, unfortunately, and a bit challenging. So I think it's quite important to remember that we still need to nurture young minds, because not all young people will know how to operate in the world of business and digital etheric finance. And even though it's something many young men and women are growing up with. So in my case, I think it might be because it is like, in the ether, if you like, it is physical, like cash, notes and coins. So we need to remember to nurture young people who are interested in going into e-business, who might be a bit too embarrassed to admit that, I want to go into this avenue, but I struggle with this, and this, even because it's become an expectation for young people to be quite adept at this kind of way of operating. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Adam. Mr. Shankar, you have a vast of knowledge and experience from Global Chamber of Commerce, especially from India. I love to learn more that how Indian community and business organizations actually they support business innovations, and what the real thing happening inside India. I don't know. There is I think internet issues. Uh, Professor David Smith. I just want to get some sort of input from Mr. Shankar, but maybe he may join. Already he joined.
That's fine.
Okay. Mr. Shankar, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. We just love to know some business innovation from India, an Indian perspective. And you are running Global Chamber of Commerce, and what type of innovations actually happening inside Indian corporations?
See, we have some of the greatest ecosystems happening with university and industry partnerships. And there are hundreds of innovation and accelerator the government is promoting, and all under one roof called Startup India. And there are great grants, there are great possibilities opening up. And India is very good with fintech, agri-tech, medtech. And there are companies that are progressing so fast that some of them have become global icons. And having said that, one of the largest icons is in the edtech called Baiju, started by a simple teacher who was actually doing tuitions. And then he had this idea and it went from success to success. And today it's a multi-billion-dollar company acquiring companies in the United States. So India's ecosystem is pretty much prime in terms of taking startups forward. And there are thousands of startups coming. And what I was actually, when I saw this topic, I was thinking about factories and innovations, which is what the next step would be. There is one is startup, and innovation centers that are like incubation for creating new businesses for economic development. What that means is we have technologies from around the world, and we bring it, and there's an incubation required for localizing that. And these could actually become very exciting as a way to do FDI, which is the very important. And FDIs made China, FDIs can make countries of the world. And for that, I think we need, as WTEF, to create a concept for incubation for economic development and technology transfer. That will be a game changer. I would love to work on this because this is my area of work and area of interest to do local economic development. And When you say clean tech, we have a program by Prime Minister Modi. It's called Swachh Bharat. And we're looking to do clean tech technologies, how to plug that in. And if you're talking about manufacturing, we have something called Make in India. That's a great thing. And so, if there is a system that can integrate universities and incubation centers for increasing the GDP using joint venture as a methodology, there are funds available, but we can actually tap into that and see how this can be created.
Excellent. Mr. Shankar, actually, we are developing in that way what you are
Okay.
discussing today's World Talent Economy Forums. We are developing our think tanks and we are helping government and corporations. And that's why this Dubai Expo is very important for World Talent Economy Forums. Actually, Malaysian government, they invite World Talent Economy Forums for our excellent contributions in our open dialogues, and this is actually FDI related activities. It's a public-private partnerships. All of the
Right.
interesting things actually we will work on that. And it's an open platform. It's like open source. Everybody can join and discuss. And I'm sure we are now we are getting a very strong audience. Many developing nations, governments, prime minister office, and the planning ministries, and the corporations, many important corporations, they are actually observing our activities. And this is one of the very great outcomes. Actually, Malaysian government hire World Talent Economy Forum for this kind of open dialogue, and this they believe that open dialogue actually helps to grow business, and it helps to develop a resilient Malaysia. So I believe developing nations has many projects and many activities. We are open for that. We are really open for that, and we love to learn from each other. Mr. Dan, I think you want to add some
I have
point.
a comment on that. I love that you mentioned open source there, because there's another, that's going to be another huge driver of fixing the challenges that we've got right now. Hold on, let me turn this off.
Yeah, yes.
We've all heard of as a service. There's Amazon Web Services. They offer platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. You can download almost anything now from the cloud in a metered kind of pay as you go way. So I would like to propose open source problem solving as a service. And this could be a really huge area. I mean, you could have factories as a service. You could put out a specification for something, and then people could bid on it, saying, "Oh, I can produce it in this quantity, and these deadlines, and this price, and this production run." So we've only begun to scratch the surface, the service of the service, as it were. So let's explore open source problem solving as a service that we could
Excellent. Yes.
provide.
It's not for individual organization. It's actually people organization. Everyone in this discussion, actually in our board, Mr. James, even in our special friend, very very special friend from the day one, he do give lot of support, and everyone is very helpful. So we want collaborations. We want more partners, more solutions. So definitely any of the innovative idea, we are open for that. Professor David B. Smith, I love to learn from you. I am also a big fan of you as a professor. I have a plan in the future. If I get any of your class, I want to join in your classroom. Anyway, professor. So one point, like I saw, example, I'm from Bangladesh. I'm from a developing nation, but I saw many of the developing nations people, they go to USA, they learn from USA educations, and they become very good problem solver. Even today's session, actually we are sharing with youtube innovators, Mr. Jawad Karim. His a background actually from Bangladesh. Khan Academy background from Bangladesh. Even the some of the Bangladeshi great innovations and great business like Bikash, Grameen Phones, many things actually come from MIT. Professor Dr. Iqbal Kadir, actually professor of MIT. My question is that this is actually very crucial. Even here is my Indian friend. Many of the Indian people, they go to India, USA, and they learn from USA, and they become the CEO of many tech companies. What is the like strategy like behind this kind of talent hunting? And why the developing nations cannot, like examples, the same asset when they live in example like India or Bangladesh, I'm sorry, even in Pakistan, they are not so useful. But when they shift or they moved and they learn from USA education system, they become more productive. Even if they go back to their country, example Dr. Muhammad Yunus, I know Dr. Fazl Hassan Abed, many successful, even Samsung H Chaudhary from Cambridge University. What is the like fact behind that? Why developing nations cannot utilizing the resources? On the same hand, same resource they go to USA or Europe, they become so productive and they contribute a lot. What is the reason?
Well, you've hit some really interesting points in your question there. And part of it is the different models that are in place in the
Mhm,
different countries, from innovation to the way you team together and work together, the amount of or lack of government support and funding to help you do innovation. I actually love what Sharon said about the technology transfer and that. I was blessed to have been the technology transfer lead at two of America's largest consortia, MCC and Cimatech.
mhm,
And we broke the models there and established them in many places that has since been populated. And one of the differences you see internationally is many countries, they teach what is called technology pool
mhm,
or technology push. You hear the term, if they build it, if I build it, they will come. Well, that's technology push.
mhm,
That might work with some products, but for technology transfer, that does not work.
mhm,
And if I'm trying to do technology transfer, like as we talked about, it's really more of the technology pull. It's really hard to push rope. And if I'm having to transfer technology to other organizations, a pull approach works much better. In fact, I often ask the question, what is the very best type of technology transfer vehicle?
mhm,
And I get these looks back, and then I say it's a moving van because the best vehicle is to move people. And that is one of the best ways to transfer technology. If you go back and look in some of the innovation centers in the United States, if you go to Silicon Valley, if you go to Route 128 up in Boston, that area, you come down to Austin. What we've done is we've all developed models that work across our communities. In Texas, it's called the Austin model. And there's a lot of books and papers written about that. You have the same thing in Silicon Valley. But in Texas, we have a technopolis model where it's pulling together entrepreneurship, it's pulling together professional services, it's pulling together the government, academia, and larger corporations to come together to create that innovative environment.
mhm,
You bring funding in from multiple sources at the right levels. Um, I have a bias against VC funding because to me it's a short-term type of funding again. But you begin to look at the appropriate type of funding at the appropriate level. Some of the best startups going that have become very big, successful companies, they held off on any type of funding until after they had their initial products in place. And then they went and secured funding to grow that. Uh, and you see those differences. A bunch of the companies I've worked with in the EU, uh, many of them live on government funding, and they are not incentivized to take products to the market because they make enough money on government funding to not have to. So they have kind of a maker's workshop there that is paid by the government. I'm seeing that also some in the Pacific realm as well, where the money's there to support, but there's a fine line between helping them and inhibiting them. It's like in the United States is what we see with the funding today around COVID. There's
mhm,
an intense shortage of workers here because we've made money to support them too freely available to discourage them from going back and working. Same thing with entrepreneur companies. There's this line that says, this will help me get to this point, but to be successful, I've got to go to B, C, and D. And how do I do that? And so when I look at the models around the world, that's one of the biggest differences I see in looking internationally is as we look at innovation with entrepreneurship in the United States, we do not have as much government money. And we also do it in a way where companies and individuals help more versus the government help more.
Excellent. Mr. Jamsid, I think we can get more interesting points from you. You are also in Silicon Valleys. So what do you want to add?
Yes, well, fascinating points. I'm going to start with what Adam suggested about education and technology and tying them together, because I heard you, Sharif, talking about the education developing countries coming to the United States or England to become more innovative. And, you know, that's true for a small fraction of the people at higher levels of education. But our primary education systems for the masses are still stuck in an agrarian-based 19th century way of doing things. Now, how do you teach innovation? Well, you know, there are things that do, like music and math, but not the way that we teach them. You know, there's an aesthetic quality to innovation that we haven't touched upon. There's an aesthetic quality to mathematics. There's an aesthetic, E equals MC squared is one of the most beautiful equations because it's so small, so short, and so great and complex, and it's in what you actually think about its applications. Yet music will, you know, can inspire, make people happy, and it's such, you know, who some people can appreciate it, some people cannot. You know, but the people that we teach now are to do what others have written, to play what others have written, and not to create. So our education systems are falling behind the wayside. That's why I am so involved in chess in the schools, because chess teaches you to innovate. You don't know it while you're doing it, but you have to come up with a new idea, because no matter how many games you've played, you're always presented with a novel problem, and you always have to come up with a new solution for it. And so even though you don't know it, you're learning to innovate. So these are the things. If we teach music a different way, if we teach mathematics a different way, and we teach chess in the schools to earlier, we short sell the children so much. They have such a capacity to absorb this information and to use it and to become innovators at a much younger age. This is a great opportunity cost that we keep perpetuating, because if it was good enough for my grandpappy, it's good enough for me, and it's good enough for my kids. And this thinking is holding us back, and we must change our educational system. And I love the idea of models and emulating models that are successful. And, you know, the ecosystems of connecting, the collaboration. And this is the thing, you know, yeah, I really believe what David is saying is that governments can inhibit as well as comfort startups. But, you know, the capitalist system is by nature builds in barriers to entry for startups. And, you know, we had Teddy Roosevelt ran as a trust. He was going to bust the trusts. And then Judge Green had to break up AT&T as a monopoly. And these types of systems keep coming up. We keep building systems that cause barriers to entry. And every time there's a startup, there are forces bigger than them trying to hold them back, wanting them not to become successful. So we need a post-capitalist way of thinking about these things, where it's collaborative, where we're supportive, where we're helping, we're not inhibiting. And this is a mindset that some of these developing countries that you admire aren't very good at. In fact, they're disastrously bad at it. So we need a new mindset, and maybe you can teach us how to do that, how to collaborate. But what Shankar mentioned earlier, all this innovation coming from India, maybe we can learn from you. So I think that these are the things that will make innovation more successful when it happens, and teach people to be more innovative in the first place. So these are the things that I wanted to call our attention to. And I love the technology pull instead of push. You can't push rope. You know, I can't tell you how many doors I've gone in and tried to push a pull only door and pull a push only door. You know, so I might not be the best person to talk about that, but the idea of pulling people in from various things, this is an ecosystem we're talking about. This is where these things help each other. You know, and, you know, if you want to make a stew or a soup or something like that, you need various ingredients. And this is in the old days of the office buildings, when we went to an office and worked, and we would huddle around a water cooler and exchange ideas there. You know, or sometimes we'd just go out to lunch and talk with each other and think about, oh my, what you just said sparked this idea, and I run it by you, and you go yes or no, or we argue about it, or we come up with a brand new solution to an old problem. And these are the ways we do this. Now people are working remotely. It's harder to do that. Is it? Maybe not. Maybe we have technological solutions for getting people to huddle around water coolers, to go out for coffee together, to have lunch together remotely, because these are all possibilities. And the idea that we want to focus on is the collaboration, not competition. So how do we do this? Because obviously you want to make money, you want to have a product that sells, you want to solve a problem that the market has. So there is a place for this capitalist notion, but not the way it is currently constructed. We have to remake the model so that it emphasizes collaboration. And then everybody, it's not for millionaires only, it's for the millions. Thanks very much, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Shankars, India has a huge populations, huge corporations, $5 trillion economy. So how they are adapting this industry 4.0? And you are also running a big chamber of commerce.
Yes, like always, the transition from the traditional, from the way things have been, the grooved in thinking. And sometimes I feel it's not the technology, it is the mindset that needs to learn to adapt and adopt. And I see that all the time because I'm currently advocating applied AI. And I'm saying it's applied AI, and people listen to it as AI. I say, you don't need to know AI. You don't need to know programming or coding or anything. You need to know creating scenarios, imagining things, and having an analytical mind. You need to know what the solution you want. All that is there, and the systems are there. Systems will use all kinds of data points to come up with a robo analyze and come up with something that is so simple to understand. But just to advocate this, just to tell people that this is the next step for your solutions becomes a challenge. So 4.0 is such a system where, you know, it'll turn things around, it'll increase your productivity, it will increase your profitability. It's all about connecting the dots and making it easier, manage it remotely. But having said that, there is something that we always slip into the kind of thinking that we had and not being open to do something new. So I'm about the opinion that mindset shift is very important. And one of us said that what's the difference? You said it, Professor Sharif, that what's the difference that United States has it and sometimes emerging markets don't have it? I think there is a saying, it's called form acting on matter produces life. What that means is, if Bible is a form, then one need be a matter. And we need to be under the form or under the 10 commandments to be able to follow through and not test it, but verify it. So when I think of Stanford and MIT and all of that, they're a form of thinking laid out. So the individuals are able to utilize it to maximize their thought and intelligence to come up with something. But if you just randomly give a chance to people to think, randomly think something and then say, I have an idea. Yeah, it's an idea. I remember going with a professor of mine, and we went to a studio, went to an art museum, and he said, everything is not art. There is no balance. There is no harmony. There is no higher intelligence in this. Looks like it's an art of elimination. So the artist was working on an elimination triad. There can be a system that can heal you, not as in healing in doctors, but something that harmonizes. And there can be a thought which can regenerate. And we are looking to regenerate technology ourselves. When we think of smart intelligence and thinking beyond the box and blue ocean strategy, it's like regenerative intelligence. What has not happened before cannot happen, but that's a wrong idea. But like Einstein says, the thinking that has gotten you to where you are today is insufficient to go beyond it. So that thinking is what we call as the collective WTEF, because everybody has got a limitation. But together, we can probably see something which we haven't seen before. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Shankar, for your concept and guideline. Mr. Adam, you are actually representing as a youth. So, what the idea you want to share for this innovative world?
Thank you, Sharif. I just wanted to expand a bit further on the subject of Nottingham, England, UK, Europe, like you asked me about earlier in the show. So as I was saying before, there is an academic atmosphere that feels very fertile for creative collaboration, global unity and coming together, international cooperation and teamwork. And I just used Google to double check and confirm, and I was correct the first time. It is the University of Nottingham that has a campus all the way out in Malaysia, not Nottingham Trent University, Nottingham University. Having two universities in one city with similar names can be quite confusing. And I just read that it was the first campus that was part of a British university that was established in a place outside of Britain, which is quite novel and interesting. It was built in a place called Semenyi, I pronounced that correctly, somewhere south of Kuala Lumpur, apparently. So that is a really good example of a global connection from Britain, or Western Europe rather, all the way to the Asia Pacific and back. And that would be a convenient connection that could serve as an excellent resource or highway that organizations like the WTEF could make good use of. I was just thinking what an ideal connection that is, because in my opinion, there are some cultural similarities and shared characteristics between Europe, Western Europe, and Britain in particular, and some of the nations that are part of the Asia Pacific areas like Malaysia, India, Bangladesh. I think some of those characteristics include industriousness, academic excellence, courtesy, good manners, noble ideals, family values, spiritual and religious pride, and adherence to certain morals. Similar and shared values like achievement as well, education, credentials, and the building of infrastructures to raise quality of life. And it could be because of colonial endeavors and commonwealth. And I see that as a positive characteristic rather than as a criticism as found in critical theory negativity that is fashionable nowadays, but serves to harm relationships rather than heal them and facilitate continued mutual beneficence, in my opinion. Let me make that clear. So I think Southeast Asia and Britain and Western Europeans make ideal collaborative partners, which is something that could help organizations and policy-making bodies and think tanks like WTEF. And again, as I was saying earlier, London's status as a big financial power station for the world helps to inspire this atmosphere of global cooperation. Like the saying goes, all roads lead to Rome, but is now all roads lead to London if we're talking about global finance. So we've got all these resources and we've got an ideal environment for kind of collaboration. I didn't mean to repeat myself too much. I just wanted to expand a bit further on some stuff I was saying before. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. You are talking about some of the interesting solution always. So what is the concept of business incubations, and how we can make it different from others?
Yeah, I love where this just these sessions go. It's so great to be on the dais with these great thinkers. I love the push pull metaphor. You were trying to push on a pull door and pull on a push door. But what you're doing, Sharif, in Malaysia, and I know you are the outreach ambassador from Malaysia for the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and I wish we had an ambassador like that for every country, every region, every watershed. in the world, because every region has a push and a pull to offer to the entire spaceship Earth. And I think once we get to a critical mass like that, we're going to see just amazing problem solving and human progress. You know, we were talking about you know, the young and the old collaborating, and I think that's another crucial thing, because right now there is a huge unacknowledged divide. You know, what's called ageism. There's people are very siloed in different age categories, and there's not a lot of cross fertilization taking place. But you know, the older people are probably not going to be around that long, and they need to get the younger people up to speed on how to fix things. You know, it's like, hey, you guys need to be cross trained on this. You know, biosphere that seems to be about to crash and burn. So if we could acknowledge the ageism, you know, as an unfair prejudice, and create more collaboration and mentorship relationships, I think that's going to be crucial. And also this regional push-pull outreach is going to be crucial. So I'd like to see those worked on diligently in the future. And thanks.
Excellent, excellent. Even I can remember like 5-7 years before, when I was in Bangladesh and I was in one of the largest corporations, I always invite even many Ivy League students for internship. So they can go to the different culture, they can learn from different culture, they can understand what's going on, and maybe they can add some values. So this way, I can remember many of my friends, even from Singapore, those who study in Ivy League, they regularly visit and take the internship opportunity. That is the way we have to learn from each other. We have to learn from different cultures. I can remember my major development actually happening when I developed my knowledge and views in Oxford University, in Cambridge University. I can understand the different culture, understand the different people point of view. That's why cultural exchange is very, very important. Understanding each other is very, very important. So that is the reason that I'm trying to develop, with the help of all of our board members, this talent economy, because this talent is ultimately the key who can solve the problem. So there are many problems around us. We need more solutions. So thank you. This is an excellent brainstorming for World Talent Economy Forums. I believe it will be helpful for our audience as well. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Professor David Smith. What do you want to add today?
Well, sure. Thank you. I agree with this. Has been a very good session today. I'd like to remind people that as you look at the different types of innovation, there's multiple types of innovations. The type you see most happening is what's called incremental innovation. Kind of make it a little bit more features, a little bit faster, maybe a little bit cheaper. But then you, at the other end of Excel, you have breakthrough or radical innovation. Those are the ones where the industry changes and stuff. Those are really hard to do, but those are big paybacks. And you know, a radical innovation might be how digital photography put Kodak out of business in the film industry. But then there's a type of innovation called distinctive innovation. And if I look at the S curve, distinctive innovation is the type of innovation that happens in the middle of the S curve, where disruptives at the top, incrementals at the bottom. That is where you often make the most money in that type of innovation. As we look at how to do business innovation, it's very important to remember what type of innovation it is that you're trying to do. India is particularly good at incremental innovation, as is Japan. And you see that really populating through there. One of the things that we're a little bit better doing in the United States is more the breakthrough type of innovation. And you see that. But again, the area of greatest impact is that distinctive innovation. And that's one that we should work on with the people. And one of the things of distinctive innovation is it requires the collaboration, which all the other speakers have spoken about. It acquires an understanding of market. It requires an understanding of the regulatory environment and help with that. It requires an understanding of, are you going to have the appropriate staff the appropriate people to be able to make it work? And is the market capable of accepting that innovation? And those are often forgotten about as you look at how to put the models together to drive innovation. So I'm going to go back to a point I often talk about, is that innovation is an ecosystem itself. You have different types of innovations. You have different models for putting innovation in place. You have different ways to begin to look at it and do it. We've talked about push-pull, all the other things, but it's this complex ecosystem that is not one size fits all. And it has to be worked to be appropriate for the communities, the entrepreneurs, the more mature institutions as well to happen, but is one that is critically necessary for us to achieve today in all regions across across the world, not just the United States, not just the Pacific area, not just India, not just Malaysia. It's critical across the entire globe today for us to be successful with solving some of the grand challenges that we need innovation in place to solve.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David Smith. Thank you for your concluding remarks. Mr. James Eid.
Thank you, Sharif. Another wonderful discussion. I love listening to David, and if he teaches continuing ed, I'd sign up, because that's one of the things that I do I live walking distance from Stanford, and I take continuing education classes, 1 or 2 a year, not just from Stanford, but from Stanford as well. And I get these catalogs, and they are like, yeah, I want to take that. Yeah, I want to take that. But, you can only do so much. But there's so much opportunity to learn. And so I say, don't wait to be taught, teach yourself, sign up for something and learn. Keep learning. And the problem in our country, and I don't want to praise our country too much, or developed countries in general too much, because there's a strong thread of anti-intellectualism in the United States. Richard Hofstadter wrote a book about it, which was eye-opening to me, because I thought it was just me and my experience, but no, it's everywhere throughout this country that the trust in science is broken. Trust in anything that the medical community tells you has been broken. So, there's a strong sense here that we cannot be discouraged by it. We will face it. And it's one of those forces that we will inevitably encounter, but we must persevere through it. We must continue to learn, continue to advance our knowledge, and continue to apply it where appropriate, as David said. It's not one size fits all. The other thing, I went to Europe multiple times, and my favorite course was history of European intellectual history. And it was like, there is a more favorable breeding ground for that type of thought. And there are pockets of it in the United States, but it's not generally part of our culture. And what's one of the things we want to change. So this idea of teaching innovation to our children is one way to change that society. Even an incremental change in our society would be so incredibly powerful and positive. And I wanted to talk about the ageism as well, because mentoring has not gone away. Mentoring is still very appropriate. But what happens is that the technological advances have not just continued to increase, they've accelerated beyond our imaginations 50 years ago. And they continue to increase. And so, like, my niece has to show me how to use my phone in some cases. And it's like, okay, I'm older, and therefore my niece thinks I'm out of it. Well, there are things that my niece can learn from me. But I can't teach her how to use the new technology. She has to teach me. So this mutual respect has to be there. And what I can teach her about is modeling. Systems of systems that David talks about so often. It's this kind of approach where an appropriate use of technology, where, don't build windmills where there's no wind. This is the kind of thing that experience can teach you. And it's invaluable, because you see young people making the same mistakes over and over again. As the 5 years go by, and then another young person is making the same mistake that person 5 years earlier had made. And you could spare them that suffering, that failure, if you can mentor them. And this is part of the collaboration that we're all talking about. It's tapping into the people that have built the models, that have the systems in place, that can build the networks that everybody needs, because certainly when I was young, I thought I could do it myself. I thought I could do everything myself. I never needed help in any way, to quote the Beatles. But, this is the type of thing that we have to beat out of the young. It's like, no, everybody needs help. Everybody needs help. And provide help with what you're good at and to someone who's not good at what you're good at. So it's collaborative, it's cooperative. And these are the things we want to teach our young people, that that's necessary. And that is what you want to be strong at, not so self-assured that you can do things by yourself. This is not a model for success. It's a model for failure, a repeated failure. And it's disturbing to see it repeated again and again. But when you know that there's a better model out there, and it's not only competition, but it's collaboration and cooperation. And if you combine the 3 C's, you're going to have a winner. So thanks very much for the show, Sharif. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks today?
Thank you very much. I loved what Mr. Dan said, and then when Mr. James reiterated it. I second their thoughts, I third their thoughts about cooperation and teamwork between generations. And I know certainly in Britain there is a lot of focus on the youth, empowering young people, which is a kind of a continuation of this Cool Britannia youth culture found in education, media, the arts, in the mainstream, in pop music. And Cool Britannia started when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister, I think, when bands like Oasis and artists like Tracy Emin, music movements like rave and acid house were taking off. Obviously, it's a pun on Rule Britannia, and Cool Britannia is very much a continuation of this liberal, multicultural, youth-focused educational and artistic culture. Thus, it is important not to leave members of the older generations behind in the dust when they have all that experience, advice, and wisdom to offer. It isn't helped by snarky, okay, boomer memes. Of course, people in older generations are not perfect. They have their own rather irritating characteristics, but then again, so does everyone. So we need to keep channels open to help facilitate this intergenerational cross-pollination of ideas and wisdom, which can work quite nicely with youthful optimism and idealism and brash, cocksure motivation and confidence. We need all of that. We need aged wisdom to temper that youthful motivation and vice versa. And it would be nice to use that as a model to inspire collaboration between other demographics who are known to mistrust each other usually. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, I saw some studies recently that talked about the state of the aging brain. And fortunately, one thing that does not decrease with age is creative problem solving. Our artistic, integrated, intuitive kinds of solution seeking. I mean, you may not be as sharp at recalling facts or crunching, numbers and equations, but that doesn't detract from the power of the elder brain. So at 60 years old, I'm a little bit tuned into these kinds of facts. But I wanted to say that one of the most amazing figures in history was Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He invented both kinds of calculus, and he spoke several languages. And one thing he was concerned with was he had to ultimately give up. But he thought, what if we could make a language that would instantly turn into a thought? Imagine the quantum leaps that humanity could solve. And there's actually a species on Earth that's practically all brain, that has a skin made of chromatophores, and it's the octopus. They live in the ocean, and when they see another octopus, they just start doing these movies, these animated patterns and colors on their skin, and this is probably one of the most bizarre creative languages ever devised by nature. But it's I mean, I don't know if Leibniz knew about that, but maybe he would have become a total octopi file had he known. But with artificial intelligence taking quantum leaps, we're going to have to come up with a kind of visual linguistic to thought shorthand, because if artificial intelligence runs away, like Ray Kurzweil talks about with singularity, they're not probably going to care about us. Maybe they might care about us as a novelty or as a pet, or maybe worst case scenario, they'd see us as some annoying form of pollution they need to re-engineer. But this is something we need to think about in the next 10 years or so. We need to be concerned with how our place in the pantheon of intelligence and communication and language. So the clock is ticking, and try to integrate thoughts like that into what you're innovating on. So that's my concluding remark. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vibhash, sorry, I think this is late, but you can take your time as a concluding remarks. So we are discussing on business innovations, but thank you for joining today's session.
Yeah, I'm so sorry because, I was just concluding one transaction and the client was online. So, it took a little time, but Shankar has reminded me that this is important stuff. And, this topic of business innovation factory is something, very important in terms of what I understand from this topic. I mean, what is your perspective? If you can just give me one liner, it would be great to connect my dots into your particular topic, because I joined late and, I need some perspective, just one line perspective, like what dots you are trying to connect in the business innovation factory.
Actually, we are discussing how we can develop better business incubations as an open source mode, and how we can solve different kind of problems, and how we can apply it in different cultures.
And collaborative innovation. How do we innovate?
Oh, correct. So I think, I got a chance to, interact with in India with some of the ISRO scientists, like, in US, you have NASA, we have ISRO scientists. I interacted in past with, DRDO, Defense Research Organization of India. And, I also interacted with a couple of pharma scientists. Now, the whole challenge, in the entire innovations is basically the culture and the mindset. Of course, it starts with the mindset, and because you don't have an innovation culture, people always look out for ready-made patents and ready-made licenses, and want to quickly commercialize, and don't want to get into the struggling way of financing the research or the grants and all those things, and then they give up, because especially in the developed countries, this is a special provisions, but in the underdeveloped or semi-developed countries, because of this budgetary deficit, there is a the provisions, budgetary provisions are not relatively so high for the innovation, and they don't have an energy to stay for 10 years, 20 years of research, and that's the biggest challenge. So I think R&D fund, innovation fund, it cannot be just on the grant basis or on a donation basis, but it can be commercialized through the let's say if somebody is investing, this can be the IPR exchange, in lieu of investment. So just like venture funding, the high risk funding, same way innovation funding can be through the the commercial options rather than the grants and what do you call donations based research. So then, because the universities are also struggling, they have a limitations in terms of R&D infrastructure, and on the other side, the large corporates also, they are so commercial minded, so they unless they see the exclusive patents and global rights, they don't want to get into too much of R&D, and that's the biggest challenge. And then ultimately the innovation mindset should start from the schooling education. and it should be in the DNA, it should be in the culture, and it should be in the mindset rather than while we were discussing the education topics earlier, or the green technologies or any other innovation stuff, ideally the academia, the policy, government policy or education policy or industrial policy should come together and interject for the need for innovation, where certain mission for yeah, something. It is not like you have a leisure time available for 10 years and 20 years. Okay, let's say you can pick up any emergency subject of 17 SDG and treat as an extraordinary emergency situation, and then raise some funds and come out with the solution. Like we have a pandemic, the prime minister says that we need to deliver this vaccine, and they come out with the, in 6 months 9 months time, they come out with the vaccine. Okay, so that way we need to identify that this is, and you need to position it, you people need to feel that these are the emergency innovations. Okay, that's why because they said that okay, this kind of innovation, if somebody want to reach it to moon or Mars, that is not so emergency right now. So let the Elon Musk spend his money on how many space satellite, or how many shuttles he and Bezos want to send. But so far as the common mans are concerned, so far as the mass reach of the innovation is concerned, I think the structural fundamental reforms are required, and that is the education policy, the industrial policy, and the importance, the mindset of the industrialist and the researchers or the innovators should feel it, that why only US is feeling that Afghanistan is the emergency right now. Why can't we see that the pollution, the way pollution is happening, is also an emergency? So that those kind of situation, if we can develop, and for that this forum can come out with maybe projects, or some kind of awareness campaign, or a projects, or with the bridging platform, so this platform can reach out to the the governments and the top forums, where this has to be implemented as a mandatory subject basically, and not as a kind of we have a too much of time available, we are running against the, there is a less time, and there's a race against the time. So that emergency, sense of emergency for innovation has to be established, whether at World Economic Forum you say, or UNDP you say, or to the the top countries needs to take the initiative. This initiative will never come from the third world countries, or the underdeveloped countries, and that's a responsibility of the developed countries who are full of resources,
Yes.
and
Yes.
this is a right platform for this. And thank you so much for bringing this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Bivash. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum is a big we are advocate for developing nations. We have G20, we have G7, we have big developed countries, many forum. Yes, from the day one, I think Mr. James Eid and other speakers know I'm a big advocate for developing nations. But somehow we need more support from developing nations, government, from corporation. I know they are use money and support for their own activities, for marketing and here and there. But if they support this kind of innovative forum, I believe we have more solutions, we have more innovative personalities, those who can help, and we can grow together, and we can minimize the gap in between developed nations and developing nations. And I'm sure how I get support from the developed nation guest like Mr. James Head, Mr. David Smith, Mr. Dan, Mr. Adam, even the developing nations like Mr. Bivash. It's really, really important for global community developments. And this is the way we can improve. Mr. Bivash, yes.
Yeah. So, I know more than 100 people, because I'm basically a fund, investment bank, and family multifamily office. So I have, more than probably 100 plus, UHNI people, who have those who are spending probably in excess of $100 million just for the land acquisitions, or they have a farmhouse. But if I go for $1 million grant or a $5 million grant, they said no, there is no immediate benefit. So that is the mindset, and that is the gap basically. And they don't see this is the innovation, is the emergency. Money is there even in my vicinity. I have the excess of probably couple of $1 billion. Okay, but they don't see the innovation as an emergency. And there are a lot of university people go and queue up with them to get some research grant or some donations, and maybe it's not happening. But if you look at the structures, the way they spend, so they don't have that kind of a sense of emergency. How can we bring that culture? And that's where is the key. I mean, if we have the structure, strategy, platform, and then impact coming from the top, and it's a forceful execution, then only, or because awareness will take its own time. But if it is a mandatory protocol coming from, just one example, if you have Brexit happening, so Brexit is happening, you can't do that. You can't do anything. If the vaccination is mandatory, it is mandatory. Like that, if you need to get quarantine, you need to quarantine. So innovation is a mandatory subject, emergency subject, and number one priority subject. That basic thing we need to establish, with some kind of a strategy, different strategy. And that's where we can come out with some implementation plan.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your guidelines. Hopefully we will work together and we will implement good strategy together. So thank you, Mr. James Eid, Professor David Smith, Mr. Dan, Mr. Adam, and Mr. Bibhash for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye-bye.